The United States' desire to take action against Venezuela is not about oil itself, but about maintaining the strong position of the US dollar, which is pegged to oil. With external debt reaching as high as $36 trillion, the US has been relying on issuing new debt to repay old debt to sustain its operations. It must secure the status of the US dollar, otherwise, the US economy will collapse. One of the most crucial means to achieve this is to ensure that the US dollar remains tied to the pricing of bulk commodities. As the lifeblood of the global economy, oil is undoubtedly the top priority in this regard. Most major oil-producing countries around the world have already been bound to the US through political and military ties. Only 3 countries, Venezuela, Russia, and Iran, stand out as glaring exceptions. Currently, Russia and Iran are either mired in wars or have already been severely hit. Naturally, Venezuela has become the next target. Many analyses argue that the U.S. energy strategy is centered on controlling oil, but is this really the case? The U.S. strategy toward oil-producing countries is most evident in the Middle East, the world's largest oil-producing region. The U.S. has military garrisons in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates, yet it has never demanded control of their oil fields or interfered with who they sell their oil to. In fact, to stabilize oil prices, U.S. presidents have even been willing to lower their stance and personally visit Middle Eastern monarchs to request increased oil production. However, the U.S. adheres to one unbreakable rule: it must uphold the peg of oil to the U.S. dollar. In the history of the Middle East, the United States has repeatedly launched wars to safeguard the status of the U.S. dollar. The Iraq War broke out in 2003, and the world accused the United States of coveting Iraqi oil. However, after the war, when the United States supported the establishment of a new Iraqi government, it did not control any oil fields in Iraq, nor did it control Iraq's oil sales. Up to now, the Chinese-funded enterprises actually hold the largest share of oil fields in Iraq, which was something unimaginable at that time. Of course, the United States did not spend a huge amount of money to overthrow Saddam out of charity. The logic behind it was to establish an obedient Iraqi government. And the primary way to make it obedient was to tie the US dollar to oil sales. Iran is another example. After the Islamic Revolution in 1979, the clergy group that came to power began to be high-profile anti-American, and for this reason, it has suffered more than 40 years of economic sanctions from the United States. At that time, since another superpower, the Soviet Union, was still alive, the United States did not have very good solutions for Iran. After the end of the Cold War, the United States successively launched the Gulf War, the Afghanistan War, and the Iraq War in the Middle East, each time near Iran. So during this period, Iran was relatively quiet. Until October 2023, the sudden outbreak of the current Israel-Palestine conflict broke this calm. After Trump took office, the first foreign economic sanction decree he signed was to resume the maximum pressure policy on Iran that he had implemented during his first term. Later, the U.S. also used Israel to deal a heavy blow to Iran's military strength. Currently, Iran's crude oil output is only 500,000 barrels per day, less than 20% of its peak level. Severe economic pressure has triggered strong calls for reform within Iran, and the core of such reform is to improve relations with the United States. Russia's situation is slightly different. Russia never took a high-profile anti-U.S. stance. In fact, from its independence until the early days of Putin's administration, Russia harbored great hopes for the West, trying to integrate into it, and there was even a period of honeymoon between Russia and the West. For example, Russia successfully joined the Group of Eight, G8. During this period, although Russia adopted an extremely friendly attitude toward the U.S., even to the extent of being quite accommodating, the U.S. never intended to accept Russia. After all, Russia is too large a country and a major military power, making it impossible for the U.S. to control. At that time, Russia's fragile economy also gave the U.S. an opportunity to start a process of weakening Russia. From the 1999 Kosovo War to the 2004 Ukrainian Orange Revolution, these were all part of the U.S. plan to weaken Russia's influence in its peripheral regions. After the 2014 Crimean incident, the U.S. began to openly suppress Russia directly. It was not until the 2022 outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine war that Russia was collectively sanctioned by the West, expelled from the U.S. dollar settlement system, and forced to cut off ties with most of the world's economies. As the war drags on, Russia is gradually being drained of its strength. Regardless of the outcome of this war, the US has essentially achieved its goal of weakening Russia. After the war, Russia will most likely be reduced to a large oil-producing country. It will not be able, dare, or have the strength to challenge the US dollar's pegged status to oil. From all these examples, it is clear that a key part of US foreign policy is this: when it comes to oil-producing countries that refuse to comply, the US will show no mercy. Now Russia is mired in the quagmire of war, and Iran has been severely hit. Naturally, Venezuela has become the next target. Yet Venezuela's situation is different from that of Russia and Iran. Its international influence and military strength are far weaker, and it poses a much smaller threat to the United States. Most importantly, Venezuela is plagued by a host of internal problems. Despite being the country with the world's largest proven crude oil reserves, it is in a mess, even ranking among the poorest countries globally. Over the past decade, Venezuela's GDP has plummeted by 75%, and its per capita GDP has fallen from approximately $15,000 to $1,800. In 2018, it even recorded an inflation rate of over 8,000 times. With its economy in shambles, even the supply of basic daily necessities has become a problem. People have to line up just to buy toilet paper, body wash, and soap. Public discontent has been growing. According to statistics from the UN Refugee Agency, since Venezuela's economic crisis began in 2014, more than 7.7 million people have fled the country, accounting for 25% of its total population. Such a country poses no threat to the United States, so there is no need for the US to launch a large-scale military operation. When dealing with countries like this, the US has always had a special skill: supporting opposition groups to take control without shedding a drop of blood. That is why the US has only dispatched 3 destroyers and 4,000 soldiers this time. This small contingent is certainly not intended to launch an attack on Maduro's government. As expected, the latest news shows that the US has announced the withdrawal of this naval force back to the country, citing the impact of hurricanes. However, the United States will certainly not stop here. It will undoubtedly continue to create trouble for Maduro next.